Welcome back to 428 Shibuya Scramble. So in the last part, everything's real fucked. And there appears to be no real way to get out of it, at least from all of the storylines that we currently have. Which is why it is time to make a new story. A completely new story. Because Tateno is now a main fucking character. Who is taking, what, Osawa's? I think he might be taking Osawa's spot. No, he's got his own little spot. Never mind. Holy shit. Atonement. Kyozo Tateno gingerly flexed his right elbow. It was still a little sore, but it shouldn't interfere with his ability to drive. Does that hurt? Asked the girl called Canaan. No, I'm all right. Good thing I didn't kill you, she said, her tone matter-of-fact. You ought to thank that younger detective. If he hadn't stopped me, you wouldn't be here right now. Is that right? Tateno looked over at Kano. He was talking to Achi and the others about something. Last time Tateno had seen Achi had been back at Kotone's wake. He felt a strong surge of emotion, seeing how the boy had grown into a fine young man. Are you sure you don't mind driving? Are you sure you don't mind driving? Kanan's voice snapped Tateno back into the moment. Yes, it won't be a problem. Back when she'd attacked him on that rooftop, she'd moved too quickly for him to even get a glimpse at her face. Now that he was able to get a good look at her, he was shocked by how young she looked. And yet there was a cold gleam in her eyes, a glitter of awareness with no trace of emotion behind it whatsoever. In his long career as a detective, Tateno had seen eyes like that before. It was a look he knew well. The look of someone who had killed, and had done so many times. I'm so sorry about all this. Oh, I'm so sorry about all of this. Please look after my sister, Hitomi said. She bowed deeply. No, I'm the one who should apologize. Tateno would have liked to go on, to say that helping now was the least he could do to atone for what he'd done earlier, but he stopped himself there. Nothing he could say to Hitomi Osawa could possibly earn her forgiveness. Silently, Tateno lowered his head. Subsequent actions would have to make up for his crimes. He had to hope that this was possible. Kanan, you look after my sister too. Hitomi bowed once more. You two know each other? You two know each other? Tateno looked at the two girls in surprise. Kanan is my sister's friend, Hitomi said. I just met her for the first time today. What strange series of events could have transpired for Maria and Canaan to wind up as friends? Tateno felt a prickle of curiosity, but now wasn't the time for that conversation. Daisuke reappeared. He had gone to fetch for his car keys. You know where it's parked, yeah? He asked. Same as back in the day? That's right. Over where we always hang out with Tone back in grade school. All at once, Tateno was hit with a surge of childhood memories. The sky was a piercing blue. The droning of cicadas echoed in his ears. A refreshing breeze brought intermittent respite from the heat. Intermittent? Yeah, intermittent respite from the heat. During summer vacation, they spent their days here, the parking lot behind Daisuke's house. As Tateno and Daisuke played near the stairs at the side of the lot, the blazing sun beating down on them, Tateno would always come along with some iced barley tea for them. The two boys would race to see who could drink theirs up the fastest. The cold and fragrant tea flowed down their welcoming throats. Most of the time it was Tateno who would finish first. Daisuke would wound up choking and spitting his out. Tateno would flash him a motherly and sympathetic smile. Then Daisuke would grin back at her sheepishly and fuss with his hair. That had all been nearly 40 years ago, but Tateno could envision their smiles as vividly now as ever. They were his only fond memories of his childhood. Tateno took the keys from Daisuke, clutching them firmly in his fist. "All right," he said. "We'll be back." He lifted up Maria and, with Canaan supporting her on the other side, began to head for the door. Then, Kano called out to him. "Detective Tateno." "Aye." There was a look of sadness on the younger man's face. "Don't let yourself become a detective like me." Tateno had the words right on the tip of his tongue, but he swallowed them back down. It suddenly seemed petty to trivialize the aspirations Kano had held for so long. "Once Maria is safe, I'll turn myself in." After he made sure that Maria got to the laboratory, he would cease to be a detective, and instead would simply be a criminal. In Japan, a charge of plotting to commit the crime of murder carries a prison sentence with labor of no more than 2 years. Despite the failures that had brought him to this position, nothing he had said up until now had been a lie. Of that much he could be proud. Never lose sight of what you're supposed to protect. Ever. He could at least try to be the detective Kano had so admired until the very end. As Tateno left the room, Kano saluted him crisply. Ordinarily, a detective wouldn't salute in plainclothes or without his cap. The little breach of etiquette just showed all the more clearly how Kano felt. If Tateno hadn't been holding Maria up, he would have returned the gesture. Leaving Endo Electronics, Tateno and Canaan carried Maria up a hectic Dogenzaka. The parking lot was less than a minute away by foot. Before long, however, they found their way blocked by a veritable wall of people. It was a riot squad with Kuze at the head. A police squad that carries out security and control activities in order to maintain and restore public order in the event of an emergency. The Tokyo Metropolitan Police Department has 9 riot police units, along with a support vehicle unit for a total of 10 such squads. These also comprise teams that carry out certain specific functions, such as the Explosive Ordnance Division and Chemical Defense Unit. Director Kuze? Tateno, what are you planning on doing with that girl? What are you planning on doing with her? I already informed Kano that she'd be put under quarantine. If she's allowed to remain free, all of Shibuya will be in danger. Canaan took a step forward. Tateno could sense that she was about to move in for the kill. Easy now, he said softly. Wait. As skilled as Canaan was, she was no match for an entire armed police squad. I'm not going to take all of them on, she murmured. I'm just going to take the man in charge hostage. Tateno swallowed. Capture Kuze and then run off? Could work. Considering the time limit they were facing, he knew that they had to find some way to force their way through here. Still, given how far they still had to go to reach the laboratory, he wanted to avoid direct conflict as much as possible. Give me 1 minute. No, just 30 seconds. Tateno turned and stared at Kuze. The two had known each other since their rookie days. Director Kuze, tell me, what is it that you believe in? What do I believe in? Yes, weren't you always the one who said that they needed to put faith in your subordinate That you needed to put faith in your subordinates no matter what? Well, yes. Yes, that's right. Jose's eyes wavered ever so slightly. In that case, put your faith in me. No. Put your faith in Kano. In Kano. He believes that saving Mario Osawa will let us save Shibuya. He's doing everything he can to make that happen. Jose's lip curled into a wry grin. That sounds like Kano, alright. Always thinking in such simple terms. Usually the simple answer is the right one, sir. People like you and me overthink things. We make them more complicated than they need to be. Just consider for a moment. Will putting Maria Osawa under quarantine clear up this case? No, it won't. So long as we don't know how she was infected with the virus, we can't rule out the possibility that other people have been infected as well. Tateno kept his eyes locked on Kuze's. Director Kuze, right now, what we need to do more than anything is get our hands on that antiviral drug. We need to be helping Kano. Please, sir. Kuze furrowed his brow and thought for a few moments, then shook his head. No, buddy. Come on. I can't do that. You gotta understand the position I'm in. The director's voice squeaked into a childish register. Canaan narrowed her eyes. What's this guy's deal? She whispered. It's hard to explain. When his voice gets like that, it means... He was confused. Now was their chance to make a run for it. Tateno signaled with his eyes to Canaan that then got ready to sprint past Kuze and his team. He didn't get the chance to, though. Ugh! Suddenly, Kuze let out a pained yelp. Then, as Tateno watched in surprise, he proceeded to collapse onto the pavement. Ah! It hurts! It hurts! Have I been infected with the virus, too? Riot Squad immediately rushed to the director's side. As Tateno stood there dumbstruck, Kuze secretly flashed him a knowing wink. That was a terrible. Yeah, but it was a tour de force as far as I'm concerned. Inwardly, Tateno gave his boss a nod of respect. Slipping past the riot squad, he and Canaan head for the parking lot. Several members of Kuze's team hurried to chase after them. Don't follow them! Kuze cried out as he writhed on the ground. Everyone stay back! If you do get too close to Mario Osawa, you'll be infected as well! The riot squad stopped in their tracks. Tateno and Canaan took the opportunity to hurry out of sight. Darting through some narrow alleyways, they arrive at the parking lot. The area had changed since Tateno's youth, but some of the old air of nostalgia still lingered. There it is. He spotted the minivan with Endo Electronics written on the side. Tateno gently laid Maria on the back seat. She was still apparently unconscious. Once Canaan had climbed into the passenger seat, Tateno hit the gas and sped off. How far is it to the lab? Canaan asked. Normally it would take about 15 minutes, but with this traffic, it's hard to say. Tateno avoided the spot and go of Dogonzaka, taking side streets as he headed toward Shibuya Station. Once they had re-emerged on the main thoroughfare, however, he spotted a checkpoint set up ahead. Barricades and armored vehicles were blocking the road. The scale of the security effort showed just how grave the situation truly was. Tateno hit the brakes. What do we do? Canaan spoke without taking her eyes off the barricade ahead. Tateno thought for a few moments before arriving at an answer. They'd have to find another way around. Get in the back seat, Tateno told Canaan. Why? I want you to hold on to Maria so she doesn't fall. A feisty grin came to Canaan's face. You got it. Tateno waited until Canaan had made her way into the back. Then he threw the minivan into reverse and jammed his foot on the gas. He cut the steering wheel sharply to one side. A loud screeching filled the air as centrifugal force made the vehicle tilt. Then a patrol car came roaring out of a nearby side road. What the? Lieutenant reflexively jammed on the brakes. The police cruiser cut in front of the minivan, turning to head right toward the roadblock. Crashing into the barricade, it plowed on through, not stopping until it slewed up onto the curb beyond. The car's impact had made enough space for another vehicle to slip through in its wake. The minivan barreled on through the checkpoint. Tateno wondered who in the world had been driving the cruiser. Tateno's phone rang and he picked up as he sped onward. Were you able to break through safely? It was the voice of Detective Kajiwara. Tateno had thought he was at the Osawa residence. A patrol car just now. That was you? A call came in from the Task Force HQ, saying that Kano had found Maria. I figured maybe Kano was planning to take her to Okoshi Pharmaceutical, and so I thought he'd need to make his way through one of the checkpoints here. But the fact that it was you, Detective Tateno. Now that was quite unexpected. He let out a weak chuckle. Kajiwara, are you hurt? No, don't worry about me. Just please, help Maria. I made a promise to her father that I'd save his daughter, no matter what. Tateno could hear the energy draining from Kajiwara's voice. Understood. I'll keep that promise for you, then. Thank you. The line went dead. He crashed headlong through that barricade. There was no way he'd come out of that uninjured. Sorry, Kajiwara, Tateno said to himself under his breath. And thank you. He bit his lip, then stepped hard on the gas again. Keep out. Fuck. Yeah, that's still bad end. That's for Achi. That's for Kano. That's for Kano. That's for Stanley. An odd man. Fuck. Okay. Well, there might be other stuff. A quavering voice. He was being completely serious. They were going to have to break through by force. Tateno took a determined step forward. Anyways. Are we good now? Yeah, we are. Okay, so a blocked path. They talked their way through. Wait here, I'm going to try something. What are you going to do? A little bit of persuasion. Tateno reached for the door handle, then Canaan stopped him. Don't, she said, keeping her eyes fixed forward. You'd just be wasting your time. But Tateno didn't get to finish his thought. A police car came out on a nearby side road. What the? Wham! Crashing the barricade, plowed through, stopping, boom. Minivan bailed on through the checkpoint. Well, who in the world could have been in that cruiser? Yeah, there's the keep out. Alright, so what if I decide to barrel on through? They'd have to plow on through. Get in the back seat. Why? I want you to hold on to Maria so she doesn't fall. You got it. Gun to the accelerator. It's do or die now. Tateno clenched his teeth as the van picked up speed. Then a patrol car ran. What the? Ah! Whoa! Crashed into the barricaded flat on through. Boom. In the end, nothing changes. Alright, here goes. And then we're back here. Fuck. So somewhere along the lines, I can either unlock something to continue Tateno, or I have to unlock some way to get to Stanley quicker. Tateno's words, perhaps. Stanley goes on his own. Stanley. I understand. Do we have to and come back soon? I'm sorry. I wish I could tell you more. It's alright. I'll find a way to get by. Big idea what Stanley's up to, but I need to keep things hidden from his allies in order to keep Alphard in the dark. That was Kano's guess. This is no ordinary opponent they were against. Keeping secret even among friends wasn't necessarily a bad call. Kano promised me one thing. What's that? Once this is all over, you'll go have a beer with me. Sure. Alright. Kano couldn't help but smile. That's a promise now, remember? The promise these two made just now mirrors another made by a certain pair of brothers in the past. Once this is all tidy up, I'm going to need a drink. Let's you and me have a beer together. That was what the younger brother said, and the older brother still feels the pain of that promise going unfilled. Okay. He walked out of the workroom. And everything's the same for Kano. Okay. Here we go. What the hell? His is gray. That's interesting. Makes sense. In a way. It was 6:00 p.m. Alphard had contacted the Motley team at Endo Electronics, and the situation had immediately deteriorated. The new developments had also provided them with one big chance. A chance that Alphard might appear in person at long last. Did fine. Jack Stanley set his hand on Kano's shoulder. A weak smile came to the detective's face. Stanley paused, unexpectedly moved. For that one moment, he saw in Kano the image of his younger brother, Frank. Jack, you have to get everyone to a safe place right away. Frank's nervous shout echoed through the hotel lobby. Stanley's younger brother was a member of the Bomb and Arson Squad, subsection of the Chicago Police Department's Bureau of Investigative Services, BIS, that handles investigation on bomb and arson-related cases. This was 2 years ago. CIA had obtained intel that Alphard was targeting a high-class hotel in Chicago for a terror attack. Stanley and his team had searched the hotel interior and had discovered the bomb set inside a large planter. When Frank arrived at the scene and saw the explosive, his expression grew grim. Detonation trigger is set in the worst possible place. It's going to be a bastard to remove it. In that case, you need to get out of there too, Frank, Stanley said. No, I need to make sure I can figure out how this thing is set up so the disposal unit knows what to do when they get here. I'll be alright. Look, you can probably see it from back there. Stanley could indeed see the small explosive from where he stood. It was held in place by several screws. The timer had just ticked down past the 30-minute mark. There's plenty of time left for the disposal guys to get here. Jack, I need you to help everyone evacuate the building. There are a lot of people who haven't gotten out yet. But, Stanley hesitated. From a cold and logical perspective, Frank was right. He had a job to do, and if Stanley listened to his personal feelings and tried to usher his brother out of there, a lot of innocent people might die. All right, he said. I understand. Heck, if we had something as simple as some dry ice, we could just freeze this thing. Frank grimaced in his eyes as he eyed the bomb. Dry ice, huh? I don't suppose ice cream would do the trick. The would be a waste of ice cream. Better off just eating it. Of course, even dry ice would be a long shot in place of actual liquid nitrogen. The brothers looked at one another, and for a moment the tension dissolved into laughter. All right, Stanley said. I'll be back. Hey, Jack. Once this all tidy up, I'm gonna need a drink. Let's you and me have a beer together. Sure, you got it. Stanley headed for the hotel lobby, which was still overflowing with guests. He made the right choice here. Stanley gave Kano a thump on the back, and the detective cracked a tiny grin. What about my choices, though? Debating his next move, Stanley stepped away from the others and took out his cell phone. He made a call to his superior, Gordon. It's me, he said. What's the situation? I hear the Japanese police want to put Mario Osawa under quarantine. I'm assuming that's on your orders, sir? It is. There are too many important people in Shibuya. We can't allow that virus to get loose. Besides, we now know that Alphard is after Tateno Osawa. There's no reason to leave Maria at large any longer. If you put Maria Osawa under quarantine, she is going to die. I know that. But there will be far fewer victims as a result. Gordon's words made something inside Stanley snap. In that moment, he lost any inclination to report that he was with Maria. Failure to do so would be dereliction of duty on his part. He knew that well enough. He knew it, but the fact couldn't overcome his revulsion at Gordon's callous attitude towards Maria. Victims are still victims, he said. What was that? Nothing, sir. I'll continue my operation to apprehend Alphard. Stanley hung up the phone. He didn't care if his superiors took action against him once all this was over. They intended to sacrifice one person in order to save the lives of countless more. From a purely objective standpoint, it was the right call. But what if the person was a loved one? What would they have done then? The dilemma gnawed at the back of Stanley's mind. He couldn't shake the feeling that it was wrong to just accept the lesser of two evils, to sacrifice an innocent for the greater good. No, damn it. He would save that one life, and then save the lives of the many. He needed to find a way to avoid the so-called easy way out, no matter what it took. He wasn't about to add a second big regret to his life. Not this time. Saving Maria was the right thing to do. The judgment wasn't wrong of that, he was sure. He reaffirmed that to himself inwardly, over and over. Kano was watching Tateno prepare to depart. The group had put together a reasonable plan of action. Tateno and Canaan would head to the lab with Maria and attempt to get the antiviral for her. Stanley would accompany Kano and the others to the Scramble to apprehend Alphard. It was a two-pronged plan of action. Still, could they really count on things going as smoothly as Canaan had suggested? Stanley thought back on her earlier words. Once Alphard has made contact with Hitomi, call my cell phone. I have plenty of information Alphard might want to bargain for. I can negotiate with him directly. That meant that getting the password hinged on whatever deal they struck. What sort of things might Alphard request in exchange? Stanley cast a thoughtful look at Canaan. She was helping Tateno to carry Maria out of the room. Stanley doubted she'd answer if he asked just what her bargaining chips were. He held his tongue, watching as she left with the others. Whatever else happened, he needed to focus on capturing Alphard. He glanced at the monitor displays in the workroom. The disembodied sound of Alphard's voice from earlier crept back into his mind. I will appear at the rendezvous in person. After that, it wouldn't do for the star of the show to miss the final curtain. Those words notwithstanding, it seemed absurd that Alphard would actually show up in the flesh. Nationality, age, sex, so much about the terrorist mastermind was shrouded in mystery. Why would someone who was hidden so well for so long ever reveal their true identity? and yet Alphard had gone out of his way to claim that was precisely what was about to happen. It almost seemed like he'd made turning up in person a major selling point of the deal. I'm looking forward to meeting all of you then. There was no doubt about it. Alphard wanted them to expect him on site and in person. So, why would that be? He's using himself as bait to lure me and Canaan out. This is a near-perfect opportunity to wipe out the two people who are gunning for him the most. That being the case, how might he attempt to kill me once I'm at the Scramble? Stanley felt a sudden flash of insight. No, something was off here. His thought process was running each deduction logically following from the last. But at a time like this, that could be a very dangerous thing. Alphard may well have anticipated where his logic might lead. Stanley needed to assume that any clue he thought he'd found was something Alphard had left behind on purpose. So maybe the suggestion that their target would come to the scene was a different kind of trap. At the risk of sending himself in circles, Stanley decided to rethink the whole case from the ground up. What was the single strangest part of this whole thing? Aha, there we go. Why had Alphard put an amateur like Daisuke Endo in charge of the kidnapping? Sure, being able to get a heart for his daughter gave Daisuke a strong incentive, but there still had to be a reason why he'd been chosen. If the kidnapping had failed, what would have happened then? Of course, this was Alphard they were dealing with. Maybe the possibility of failure was somehow a part of his plan. Hell, Daisuke had managed to accidentally kidnap Maria instead of Hitomi, hadn't he? If Alphard had gone with a professional, that sort of mix-up would never have happened. And yet, even if that degree of uncertainty was acceptable or even desirable, using Daisuke seemed like a far too big a risk. There must be some other motive for bringing in Daisuke into their plan. Of course, advantage. Using Daisuke must have provided some important advantage that outweighed his flaws. It was the only thing that made sense. Which meant the reason that Alphard made Daisuke carry out the kidnapping was... I'm crossing out A. It's probably not alibi. What would the other objective be? There must be some other objective, though. To carry out some other objective. He'd set up the kidnapping, devised the ransom relay, and kept the full attention of the police on that. All the while, Alphard himself was working towards his true goal, getting Hitomi's blood, which meant that Daisuke kidnapping Maria by mistake had in fact been a misstep. That was why, in the end, Alphard had proposed trading the password for Hitomi's blood. Could that really be it? Stanley decided to take it up with the man himself. Mr. Endo, let me ask you something. Did you know Hitomi had a twin sister before the kidnapping? I didn't know. So when did you find out? After I had Maria kidnapped. The organ trafficker took one look at her and said I had the wrong girl. Said I was supposed to have abducted the younger one. He never mentioned Hitomi having a twin sister before this all started? No. If I'd known, I'd have been a lot more careful. Alphard had certainly known that the Osawa girls were twins, but despite the added risk that fact implied, he hadn't told Daisuke. There was only one logical conclusion. Daisuke's mistake hadn't been an accident. Alphard had intended for the wrong sister to get kidnapped. By using an amateur, Alphard had set up the police to write off Daisuke's kidnapping of the wrong target as a simple misstep. Had Daisuke been brought in simply in the name of camouflage? But why? Alphard was after Hitomi's blood. Daisuke was after Hitomi's heart. They both wanted the same thing, so why target Maria instead? Stanley's train of logic had run out of steam again. Still, he was sure he was on the right track. He just needed to keep following until he found out where that track would lead. Where's the storeroom where you were keeping Maria? He asked. Daisuke hung his head. It's out behind the shop. Why do you ask? Would you mind showing me? There's something I'd like to check. At this point, he needed to go back over everything right from the beginning. He followed Daisuke out of the storeroom. Speaking of the storeroom, Daisuke said as they were walking to the back part of the building, there's something I've been wondering about. Just how did Maria manage to escape in the first place? You're certain you locked her in? Stanley asked. Daisuke nodded. At 8 o'clock this morning, the organ trafficker came by to check up on her. I made sure to lock the place back up after he left. I see. That visit must have been when Maria was injected with the UA virus. It makes sense, based on our working timeline of what we expect her to go symptomatic. On our working timeline of when we expect her to go symptomatic. When they got to the storeroom, they spotted the padlock that had held shut lying broken on the ground. Daisuke picked it up, then opened the storeroom door. Look at this mess. It was obvious immediately that merchandise had been stolen. I doubt Maria did this, Daisuke said. Maybe some thieves broke in? He made a quick inspection, assessing what had been taken. Some digital cameras and laptop computers were missing. This looks like the work of some local thugs. This kind of thing had happened to me a few times before. Daisuke let out a sigh of exasperation. Stanley, meanwhile, was carefully looking around inside the storeroom. Where did you have Maria Osawa? He asked. Behind those cardboard boxes. Boxes, he indicated, were piled high, closing off one corner of the room. If Maria were unconscious behind them, the burglars might well have never noticed her. So Maria was able to escape from the storeroom thanks to the burglars breaking the lock, Stanley mused. Just what impact had that stroke of misfortune had on Alphard's plan, he wondered. What had Alphard planned to do with Maria if nobody had broken in? It's not one. He was going to release her at some later time. Since he'd gone to the trouble of infecting her with the virus, it only made sense. And Stanley could only think of one reason to release an infected Maria. To turn Shibuya into ground zero for a pandemic that would sweep through all of Tokyo. A virus with a mortality rate of 100% would have spread throughout the region before anyone even realized it. It would be impossible even to calculate the scope of such a disaster. First, it would run the circuitry around the Yamanote line, and then, if any of the infected happened to head to the airports at either Haneda or Narita, the virus would spread throughout Japan and the rest of the world in a matter of hours. But that hadn't come to pass. They'd managed to secure Maria before she could develop symptoms and become infectious. Is that because we were better than Alphard? No, that can't be. Alphard wasn't the sort to commit such indiscriminate acts of terror. The spread of infection spreading, horrific as it was likely just to cover to hide some other scheme. But then what was the ultimate goal? Stanley didn't have enough clues to go on. Stanley made his way around the stack of cardboard boxes. He spotted something that had fallen on the floor. It was a cell phone. Next to it was a woman's handbag. Stanley unzipped it and held a jumble of makeup, tissues, and other personal effects, but nothing at all unusual. If he was going to find any clues here, it would probably have to be from the cell phone. He tried turning it on, but there was no response. It appeared to be broken. Let me see that, Daisuke said from behind him. Yeah, I'll see if I can fix it. Do you think you can? Stanley asked as he handed it over. Now, I won't know until I try. But that sign out front says I run an electronics shop, isn't just for show. Turning his attention back to the handbag, Stanley searched it more thoroughly and found a photograph tucked inside that he'd overlooked on his first inspection. What the hell? He stared at the image, swallowing the lump in his throat. Is this at 7:20? It is. Oh shit, what the fuck? For some reason, Kana, Achi, Stanley was gone. Huh. Weird. Alright. Susumu came from Achi. In an instant, a dozen of SOS members headed toward Palmer from all sides. Tough luck, pal, Susumu said. Turns out we're not actually innocent bystanders. What a shame. Alright, here we go. Look out! Achi shouted. Catch him! Catch him! The hurtling vials scattered and began to fall. It seemed impossible that Kano's team would be able to keep them all from shattering against the ground. The SOS members fanned out, positioning themselves as best they could to intercept the falling vials. Kano likewise prepared to catch one that was heading straight toward him. As he did, he caught sight of Palmer speeding away. Kano made up his mind on the spot. There was only one right call here. He needed to make it. It's a farce. He had to chase after Palmer. It didn't matter if he didn't grab the vial. Something about the way this was playing out made Kano sure of it. Calling upon all his rugby training, he broke into a sprint. Deftly dodging through the crowd, Kano kept Palmer in sight. He would catch him. One way or another, he was going to bring this bastard down. Steadily, he gained on his quarry. At last, he drew within striking range and immediately dived into an expert tackle. He caught Palmer around the waist. Their bodies collided with violent force. Oof! Palmer went down, flailing, and hit the pavement hard. Even then, he tried to resist, but Kano straddled him and held him down. Tell me the password, Kano snarled. The kidnapper sneered triumphantly. You made the wrong choice. Wrong choice? The Ua virus is out now. Now nobody can be saved. You've just killed everyone in the city. No, Kano shot back. Nobody's going to die. And what makes you so sure of that? The way you fled the scene just now. If the virus had really been in those vials, you could never have hoped to escape infection. Running off on foot would be pointless. Palmer said nothing, which means there was no virus in those vials. They were just a decoy in order to buy you time to escape. Now Palmer gritted his teeth and glared up at Kano. The look on his face confirmed the detective's hunch. But more importantly, it was your eyes. You didn't have the eyes of a man who was putting his life on the line. My eyes. Who do you think you are, Sherlock Holmes? I know full well the look in a man's eyes when he's willing to die. In the back of his mind, Kano replayed the moment when Tateno, doused in gasoline, had marched into the financial building to talk down a would-be arsonist. Now then, the password. Give it to me. Now! Kano tightened his grip on Palmer's collar, but the man just gazed back at him with an icy glare. Let me have Otomi Osawa's blood. That was our original deal. Kano wasn't surprised. He'd known it wouldn't be as easy to get him to talk. Maybe it really would be impossible to strike a deal without Canaan. But if getting her on the phone wasn't an option, Kano had to figure out something else. sweat beading on his brow as he cast about for ideas. Then he happened to catch sight of a car that had been overturned by an accident nearby. Gasoline had spilled from the vehicle, creating a broad, dark puddle on the pavement. Kano took out his handcuffs, then cuffed Palmer's arm to his own. "Come with me." Jerking his captive back to his feet, Kano led him over to the car. Then, without hesitation, he sat down in the pool of gasoline. Yanking on the handcuffs, he pulled Palmer down beside him. Kano pulled out a lighter from his pocket. Palmer snorted. "And just what's this supposed to be, Tell me the password. Or else what? You'll light the gas? You'll be burned to a crisp yourself." "Yeah, probably." Kano heard the casual desperation in his own voice. "What the hell are you thinking?" The smile vanished from Palmer's face. Kano scowled down him. "Even if I die, my friends will avenge me." Kano met Palmer's stare dead on. Palmer and Kano locked eyes, both refusing to back down. The scent of gasoline fumes filled the air around them. Kano knew that the slightest spark would set off a massive fireball. Calmly, he flicked the lighter on. "You can't be serious." Palmer's fixed on the tiny flicker of the flame. "The password. You value your life so little? The password!" In his mind, Kano could see the pages of the Dick diary clear as day. Dick dictum number 1. Never lose sight of what you're supposed to protect. Ever. Palmer glared in defiance. Kano brought the lighter closer and closer to the gasoline. He could practically feel his own life growing shorter as his hand descended, and yet he felt no trace of fear. His body was numb, his senses strangely distant. Time seemed to slow. The world around him dissolved into a blur. He was surprised at how calm, how remote he felt, here in the midst of this life or death confrontation. And then, far in the depths of Palmer's eyes, he saw the barest hint of doubt. He fixed his gaze on that point of weakness and did not look away. Palmer's shoulders slumped perceptibly. Now, Kano was certain of it. This was a man who'd never put his life on the line before. Shizuo's words sounded in the back of his mind. "You need a cool mind, but a fiery spirit. A detective without both of those is worth nothing." "Let me go. Promise to let me go and I'll tell you." "Is that your answer? I don't think you quite understand the situation here." Kano brought the flame still closer to the gasoline. Palmer's eyes went wide. No longer was he able to hide his trembling uncertainty. "All right, I'll tell you. Just put that thing out. The password first." His voice a strangled snarl. Palmer gave him the password. Kano extinguished the lighter. Pulling out a cell phone, Kano dialed up Osawa. As he did, he recalled his last exchange with Stanley at the electronics shop. "There we go. Looks like we'll be able to have that beer together after all." But Osawa didn't answer. Kano guessed immediately that something was amiss. "Detective." Achi's voice was full of worry. "I've got Stanley on the line. He says that Detective Tateno..." Kano didn't get to hear the rest of Achi's words. A thunderous blast hurled him into the pavement. Where had the explosion come from? His lighter certainly hadn't set the gasoline ablaze. Kano hadn't been that clumsy. So what had happened? Only one possible answer came to his mind. Palmer had blown himself up. That only confused Kano further. His captive had already given up the password. What would prompt him to set off a bomb at this juncture? As he was losing consciousness, Kano continued to rack his brain, but he found no answers. A mysterious explosion. Huh. Why did he still seem so confident? Something definitely didn't feel right. It was just a bluff. Yeah, there we go. I was about to say, it's just like, that's not what we're at. Didn't have time. Okay, here we go. Vials in Alphard's hand came sailing high into the air. Look out! Catch him! Catch him! Hachi gestured for his comrades to fan out across the open space. The vials seemed to almost vanish against the backdrop of the evening sky. How many of them had this guy even thrown? There were so many, there was no way to tell for sure. And even if one of them had broken open, it would be a death sentence for Shibuya. They had to make sure they cut them all. Spinning around in the midst of the chaos, Hachi saw Susumu catch one vial deftly. Many other gang members appeared to have done the same. There's one more over there! Desperate shout had come from Itomi. Oh. She spotted the vial sailing in a high arc away from all the SOS members. Damn it! Hachi launched into motion, ignoring the searing pain in his leg, but the falling vial was so far away. Ah! It was now or never. He threw himself into a head-first slide. Nice catch! The gang members broke out into cheering and applause. Hachi got to his feet and looked around, but saw no sign of either Kano or Alphard. Hey Hachi, if you're looking for the detective, Susumu gestured with his chin. Hachi looked and saw Kano far away across the Scramble, chasing after Alphard. Soon both men were lost in the crowd. Hachi would have charged off in pursuit as well, but his wounded leg made that impossible. Get him, detective, he murmured under his breath. We're counting on you. Hachi's cell phone rang. It was Stanley. Mr. Stanley, what's going on? Something isn't right. Huh? I can't get in touch with Tateno, Stanley said. What about on your end? Anything unusual going on? No problems here for the moment. Detective Kano managed to catch Alphard. Did he get the password? Don't know, I think he just finished his interrogation. Could you put me on the line with Kano? Yeah, give me a sec. Hachi turned to Kano and shouted, Detective! Kano turned to look at him as he was flipping his own cell phone closed. I've got Stanley on the line! He says that Detective Tateno... Before he could complete his sentence, a massive explosion blasted Hachi off his feet. Tiny bits of metal tore through his arms, legs, and torso. He crashed to the ground and crumpled like a tattered rag. There were screams coming from all directions. But as Hachi started to fade from consciousness, the voices got softer and softer. Through the haze of pain, he saw a bloodied arm stretched out before him. He saw a hand that had been clasped with his own hand all day long. The fingers feebly reached for him, and Hachi intertwined them with his own. It took the very last of his strength. Then both hands subsided into stillness. A mysterious explosion. Things are still real fucked. Tateno, what the fuck? Okay, let's go. Alright, let's go. Damn it. So, Maria... No, I'm not. Just don't worry about me, man. Where are the airbags? I feel like the airbags should have gone off. I'm sorry, Kajiwara. And thank you. Stepped hard on the gas again. Damn it, it's still keep out. Then why did that say it wasn't keep out? What is happening? What is happening? Stanley. Alright, here we go. What the fuck is going on here, Stanley? Turning his attention back to the handbag. What the hell? He stared at the picture, swallowing the lump in his throat. It was a photo of Maria, standing next to another girl. There was something written in marker on the back. Me and Canaan, 7:30. Stanley hurriedly flipped the photo back over and looked at it again. What does this mean? The girl in the photo with Maria looked nothing like the Canaan who had been there at Endo Electronics, who had left with Maria and Tateno just a few moments ago. But if the girl they were working with wasn't Canaan, then who was she? No. Stanley felt his blood run cold. Could she be? Was she Alphard? The more he thought about it, the more it all added up. Assuming Alphard were masquerading as Canaan, the whole sequence of events suddenly began to make sense. She was strikingly audacious and fiendishly clever. But she hadn't outmaneuvered them just yet. As luck would have it, they still had a chance to stop her. And at long last, Stanley could see the outline of Alphard's plan. Her goal was to get the antiviral. By extracting the DDS from Hitomi's blood wasn't enough. Okoshi Pharmaceutical still had the drug at their laboratory. The antiviral's value came specifically from having a monopoly on it, which meant that, in addition to obtaining the drug herself, Alphard also needed to destroy Okoshi research facilities. That was the crux of her plan. The problem was finding a way to infiltrate those facilities. In all likelihood, Alphard's scheme went something like this. Having Mario Osawa kidnapped, then infected with the Uwa virus. After that, eliminate Tanaka. Once Osawa learned that Maria had been infected with the virus, he was certain to use the antiviral on her. But he'd need his partner Tanaka in order to access the storage facility, and Tanaka was dead. That was why Alphard had been masquerading as Canaan. Canaan was Maria's friend and an expert at hacking passwords. If she could secure Osawa's trust, he would let her into the research facility in order to carry out the hack. That's why Alphard, in the guise of Canaan, had saved Hitomi's life repeatedly. Getting Hitomi to trust her would likewise earn the trust of her father. There were still some finer details that remained a mystery. For instance, how was Alphard going to destroy the lab? Still, Stanley could look into that once he had her in custody. He needed to move quickly and stop her from ever getting into the Okoshi facility. I fixed it. Daisuke approached Stanley and held out Maria's cell phone. Well, as best as I could, at any rate. It looks like it'll get a signal, but whatever data on it is all gone. I see. Stanley took the phone and put it in his pocket. He'd hoped he might be able to learn something useful from it, but luck evidently wasn't on his side. He was just going to have to go up against Alphard with what he already had. Now that he'd guessed what was really going on, Stanley went to talk to Kano. Need to go to the Scramble without me, he said. What? Kano was visibly shocked. Where's this coming from all of a sudden? Please don't ask me to explain. Something else has come up and I have to see to it. Stanley hated having to do this. He wished he could explain everything. But if he made any unusual moves now, there was a risk that Alphard would pick up on it. It was better to keep his companions in the dark, just in case. I understand, Kano said. Do what you have to and come back soon. I'm sorry. I wish I could tell you more. It's all right. I'll find a way to get by. Kano gave him a thumbs up. The sight brought him some painful memories. Up until just a few hours ago, Stanley had instinctively seen Kano as all too naive. And now, he finally knew why. Kano was just like his younger brother, Frank. They might have looked very different, but in the way they mixed up their responsibilities with their personal feelings, they were totally alike. Stanley couldn't discount that naivete. In the end, it was all part of the human condition. Jack, are you really okay with this? Frank cast an anxious look at his older brother as they made their way onto the University of Chicago. A private university in Chicago, Illinois, lauded as one of the foremost research institutions in the U.S. More than 90 alumni have been awarded the Nobel Prize. The school has made a number of major contributions to the world beyond simple academics, including the construction of the world's first artificial nuclear reactor, Chicago Pile 1, and the Chicago School of Economics, a school of economic thought that stresses monetarianism. It's my responsibility to look after you, Stanley told him. As long as you take your studying seriously, I'm all for it. Frank had been worrying about tuition costs as he prepared for college. After losing their parents 5 years earlier, the two had struggled to get by. Yeah, but Stanley set both hands on his brother's shoulders. Listen to me, Frank. You're my brother, and I care about you. Just want whatever you do to be something that you can be proud of. All right, Jack. I hear you. And thanks. Kano, promise me one thing. What's that? Once this is all over, you'll go have a beer with me. Sure, all right. That's a promise now, remember? Kano flashed him a grateful smile. And in that smile, Stanley again saw a little something of Frank. Hurrying out of Endo Electronics, Stanley dialed up to Tateno as he ran along. Listen carefully. Your life may depend on it, he said as soon as Tateno picked up. He knew that a detective wouldn't be able to respond openly once Alphard was right there with him. On the spur of the moment, Stanley devised a simple code for how he should say yes or no. He told Tateno to respond with "that's right" to mean yes, and "will do" to mean no. There was no time for anything more complex. Right now, Stanley had needed to stop Alphard from getting to the lab. He quickly explained his suspicions about Canaan. Tateno sounded distinctly unnerved. At any rate, Stanley said, you need to find a way to turn back without her realizing what's going on. Will do, Tateno replied. So he was going to head to the laboratory despite Stanley's instructions. Saving Maria is your top priority, isn't it? That's right. The detective's affirmation was firm. All right then. Guess I'll have to head that way myself. In the meantime, do not let her inside that lab. That's right. Tateno was no match for Alphard. If she figured out what was going on, she'd probably kill him on the spot. Reassurance or encouragement would be meaningless right now. Instead, Stanley left Tateno with one final warning. Ah, fuck. What if we give in to emotions? Just have a emotional response. Just keep Maria safe. That's your job. Tateno hung up without saying anything. The area around Oganzaka was in disarray. The government had declared a state of high alert, and the people on the street were milling around uneasily, unsure just what was going on. Modern-day Japan lacks both the infrastructure and the legal framework to properly deal with a large-scale bioterrorist threat. Coordination between the police and self-defense force, health centers, and so forth would be a monumental task. In all likelihood, if a bioweapon were ever unleashed there, the target site would fall into chaos. The main roads had been blocked off, and automobiles and motorcycles were at a standstill. Some vehicles had overturned on the curb in an apparent attempt to circumvent the blockade. Any moment now, Kano's team would be putting their plan into action at the Scramble. Stanley wasn't sure who they might have gotten to help, but Kano was certain to put them to good use. Please stay safe. Don't you dare die on me. Stanley prayed silently as he darted underneath the railway overpass. He made it to his car, still parked on the roadside, and fortunately beyond the blocked-off area. Jumping in, he sped off toward the laboratory. As he drove along, Stanley again tried to deduce Alphard's plan of action. If Alphard herself was on the way to the lab now, then what was the objective of the fake who'd been sent to the Scramble? A call came from Tateno. Stanley here. He picked up quickly, but as he did, he wondered. Why was Tateno calling him? Alphard was right there. There was no way the detective should be risking a phone call. What's going on? Tateno said nothing. Stanley repeated the question. Still, Tateno did not reply. Stanley's apprehension spread like a droplet of ink in water. Hey, has something happened? Hey, answer me! All cut out. Stanley hurriedly dialed Tateno's number, but he couldn't get through. Something had gone badly wrong, he was sure of it. Had he been too arrogant in thinking that he might be a match for Alphard? His worries turned to the team at the Scramble. What if they had walked into a trap? Figuring that it might be too dangerous to call Kano in the midst of the negotiations, Stanley instead dialed up Achi. Mr. Stanley? What's going on? To Stanley's relief, it sounded like things down at the Scramble had gone well enough, so he asked Achi to put him on the phone with Kano. Kanan? Yeah, fine. Kano. Yeah, give me a sec, the young man said. Detective! Stanley could hear Achi shouting on the other end. I've got Stanley on the line! He said that Detective Tateno... There was a sudden, tremendous boom, and then the call cut out. Stanley's jaw dropped. Felt his mind emptied out by despair. He opened his mouth, but he couldn't even bring himself to scream. All he could do was curse inwardly again and again. Stanley slammed his fist into the steering wheel as hard as he could. Then he did it again and again, and again and again. He didn't stop even when his fists were marred with blood. Call cut short. Well, Jack Stanley. Alright. Alright, so now all we have left is Tateno. So something goes on Tateno's side that makes it so that everybody else gets a fucking bad end. That's pretty fucked. Alright, no, not there. There we go. Alright, Tateno. Let's see what the hell's going on. Once they made it past Shibuya Station, the roads were relatively clear. They ought to make it to the lab in no time. The phone rang again. It was Stanley. What's going on? He asked the American. Listen carefully. Your life may depend on it. I'm going to ask you some questions. If the answer is yes, say that's right. If it's no, reply with will do. For a moment, Tateno was bewildered. The urgency in Stanley's voice, however, he realized this was some kind of emergency. That's right, he said after a moment's thought. That ought to let Stanley know that he understood the code. Is Canaan with you right now? That's right. That Canaan is an imposter. Tateno gripped his phone more tightly, hoping it would stop the trembling in his hand. It's her, Stanley said. She's Alphard. The detective had to stifle a gasp of alarm. I don't have time to fill you in on the details, but I've got some pretty incontrovertible evidence. You need to turn back now. Tateno struggled to come to terms with what he just heard. He glanced at Canaan through the rearview mirror. She was holding Maria tightly in her arms. Was that really an act on her part? And if so, why? There was only one possible reason. If Canaan really was Alphard, and she had only one goal, she was pretending to help Maria in order to get into the lab, where she would be able to steal the antiviral. But wait, hold on. Canaan was Maria's friend, wasn't she? Hitomi had said as much herself. Canaan is my sister's friend. Maria certainly knew that what her own friend looked like. And since it was obvious that Maria might be present, it didn't make sense for a clever imposter to pretend to be Canaan. Or did it? When Canaan showed up on the roof of South Hill making her surprise attack on Tateno, Maria had taken off down the staircase without ever looking back. And when she turned up at the Endo Electronics workroom, Maria had already collapsed and fallen unconscious. Tateno felt a chill spreading through his body. As far as he knew, Maria had never actually seen the girl who was now sitting in the back seat. And then, what about Hitomi? Shouldn't she have known what Canaan looked like? Tateno tried to remember just what Hitomi had said. Canaan is my sister's friend. I just met her for the first time today. If they'd never met each other before today, then maybe Hitomi didn't know what the real Canaan looked like. That was the only explanation that made sense. Hey, Tateno, are you still with me? Stanley sounded like he was on the verge of panic. At any rate, you need to find a way to turn back without her realizing what's going on. Even if Canaan really was Alphard, Tateno had to keep heading toward the lab. He went over the coded responses in his head. Yes, that's right, no will do. Will do, he said. Saving Maria is your top priority, isn't it? That's right, Tateno affirmed. Alright then. I guess I'll have to head that way myself. In the meantime, do not let her inside the lab. That's right. Tateno hung up. Who was that? Canaan asked. Tateno felt his heart skip a beat. That was Kuze, that cop from earlier. He tried to keep his voice as level as possible. He was worried about us and wanted to check up. Ah, okay, Canaan muttered, sounding disinterested. Tateno could only hope she hadn't guessed the truth. It felt like the specter of death himself was breathing down his neck. At last, the minivan arrived at Okoshi Pharmaceutical. Tateno pulled up at the front gate and got out of the vehicle. Off to one side of the entrance was an intercom for contacting the security room. I'm assuming you've already heard the details from the director? Tateno barked into the intercom. Open up. We haven't heard anything from Director Osawa, the security guard spat back. And moreover, the laboratory is currently on lockdown. I'm sorry, but not even Director Osawa is allowed inside. That's ridiculous. Tateno scowled at the intercom in frustration, and a car came racing towards them along the street. The sound of screeching brakes filled the air as the vehicle skidded to a halt, and then Kenji Osawa jumped out of the driver's seat. Maria! Osawa rushed over to Tateno, then to Maria, where she lay at the minivan. He looked carefully at his daughter's face. Oh, thank goodness. She still hasn't gone symptomatic. Mr. Osawa, why aren't people being allowed into the laboratory? Osawa tilted his head. They're not? Tateno explained what the guard had said. That's ridiculous. Osawa immediately called the security guard on the intercom. He got the same story. You gotta be kidding me, Osawa raged. I'm the lab director here. The security guard wasn't hearing it. I'm sorry, sir. These orders come from Mr. Makino. No. So am I just supposed to sit out here and watch my daughter die? Tateno racked his brain for other ideas. Maybe they'd have to climb the gate and break their way in. Then, over the intercom, they heard the sound of a phone ringing in the security room. The security guard answered it without muting the intercom speaker. His voice was faintly audible. He sounded rather differential. When the world could he be talking to? Before Tateno could muse further, the gate suddenly opened. Why? Tateno and Osawa looked at one another in surprise. I have a message for Director Osawa from Mr. Makino, the security guard said. From Makino? Osawa huddled over the intercom and had a brief sotto-voce exchange with the guard. What was that all about? Tateno asked. It would seem that my wife was able to pull some strings for us. After Osawa left home, I had a change of heart. Even if it meant losing everything, she decided she wanted to save Maria's life. Although Maria was not Ai's real daughter, it turned out that the time they'd spent living together had sowed the first seeds of familial bond. Osawa smiled uncomfortably. Tateno didn't have the time to wonder what that might mean. Has that lock been opened for us as well? He asked. The smile disappeared from Osawa's face. No. She wasn't able to do anything about the final layer of security. I see. Well, let's regroup inside for now. Very well, Osawa said. By the way, who's going to be hacking the password? I am, Canaan replied. Ah, so you're Canaan. We should get you to the laboratory then. Osawa began to lead the way inside. Canaan followed. If Canaan really was Alphard, Tateno couldn't let her into that lab. She wouldn't get... But without getting the lock open, there was no way of getting Maria the antiviral she needed to survive. What was the right call? Should he pretend to be in the dark and let Canaan try to hack the password? They couldn't go anywhere until Stanley got there. Tateno knew exactly what he needed to do. What's the matter? Osawa turned and cast a look of confusion back at Tateno and Canaan, both of whom had stopped in their tracks. We'll wait out here, Tateno said. But, isn't Canaan going to hack the password? There's been a slight change of plan. Go ahead and wait for us at the lab, Director. All right. But we don't have much time before Maria develops symptoms. I'll be inside. Please don't keep me waiting too long. With Maria in his arms and a worried look on his face, Osawa hurried through the gate and disappeared from view. What do you think you're doing? Canaan asked, stiffening as Tateno nudged the barrel of his gun against her spine. You're Alphard, aren't you? I have no idea what you're talking about. It's no use trying to play dumb. Stanley found proof. Before he finished speaking, Canaan seemed to disappear from view. She cartwheeled away at blinding speeds, too quick for Tateno to keep a a bead on her. By the time she'd righted herself, she'd already drawn a gun of her own. Abruptly, he found himself facing her in a stare-down, weapons aimed at one another. Then Canaan's phone rang, and she reached to answer it. "Don't move," Tateno roared. "Did you forget the plan? That might be Hitomi calling." "I don't care! Don't move!" If Canaan really was Alphard, the whole plan might be a sham. Tateno kept the barrel of his gun squarely on its mark. Canaan let out a little sigh. "Have you considered that Stanley might be lying to you?" "Yes, it's possible. But I need to make sure we avoid a worst-case scenario. If you don't let me into the lab, who's going to hack the password?" We've got your little decoy. My friend will get the fake Alpha to cough up the password." Once her phone had stopped ringing, Canaan sighed again. "What about Stanley, then? Is he on his way here?" "Who knows," Tateno said. At that, Canaan lowered her gun. She seemed disturbingly full of confidence. Canaan flipped open her cell phone. "Who do you think you're calling?"
Oh, that seemed to be the right call, actually.
Tateno adjusted his aim, pointing the gun at the young woman's head. "Look, I'm going to call Hitomi and have her clear up these suspicions you have about me. We don't have the time for this right now. Wouldn't you agree?" Canaan stared back at Tateno, cell phone in hand, waiting for his reply. "Doesn't matter what Hitomi says. I trust my own judgment." "Your judgment, huh? And is that always correct?" Canaan began punching in numbers. She never took her eyes off Tateno as she waited for Hitomi to pick up. She's not answering. Canaan hung up and tried calling again. "It's me." Looked like she'd gotten through this time. "That detective doesn't trust me. Apparently he thinks I'm Alphard, not Canaan." After a few moments, Canaan held the phone out to Tateno. "Here, Hitomi says I'm definitely Canaan." Tateno didn't reach out for the phone. Instead, he advanced on Canaan with his gun still on his mark. "This is a farce," Tateno spat. "Hitomi's words don't mean a thing. You might be Canaan to her, but you aren't to me. I don't even know if there ever was a real person named Canaan in the first place. So maybe you're Canaan, and you're Alphard." Canaan shook her head and put her phone away. "If you're really Alphard, then you don't actually need to hack the password," he said. "I'm guessing you've already got it from Tanaka. Which means you'll be able to get your hands on the antiviral as soon as you get into that lab." Canaan didn't so much as flinch. "The only thing stopping you is the antiviral still in Hitomi Osawa's body. Possessing the antiviral and having a monopoly on it are two very different things. You want to eliminate Hitomi? That's why you lured her down to the Scramble. Am I wrong?" "If that's true, then how am I planning on getting rid of her? Using this so-called substitute Alphard or something?" "Yes, that's right." Tateno couldn't be certain, but he couldn't think of any other way. Canaan let out a laugh. "You don't know the first thing about Alphard," she said. "Alphard keeps the outlines of his plans blurred so that his deliberate actions just get lumped in with the coincidences. That's the crux of all of his plans. That's how he's able to pull off his schemes by himself. He'd never solicit help from a third party." The words seemed like they were Canaan's, but also seemed like they were Alphard's. Whatever the case, Tateno had to let Kano know that Hitomi was in danger. With his gun still at the ready, he got out his phone and called the detective. But the phone rang several times and nobody answered. Eventually he had no choice but to hang up. They must have been in the middle of a confrontation on the other end. For now, Tateno could only pray that Kano and the others would be able to handle whatever threat they were up against. "I am not letting you in there." At that, Canaan let out a faint chuckle. "In that case, I'm going to have to eliminate you." Even without her gun raised, she still radiated intimidation. Tateno might have had her at gunpoint, but he could feel the threat of her presence still a gathering storm. Eliminate me, he said, doing his best to mask any sign of weakness. You're the one who doesn't have your gun ready. I don't need my gun, Canaan said simply. And why's that? Because you can't shoot me. What's that supposed to mean? Canaan glared sharply at Tateno. Her look pierced him like a blade. Then she quirked an unsettling smile and took a step closer to him. Don't move, he warned, Tateno said. I don't want to pull this trigger if I don't have to. It's not that you don't want to pull that trigger. It's that you can't pull that trigger. Canaan took another step closer. You're still traumatized from that time you let your friend's wife die. How did you know about that? Tateno was shaking now, his aim wavering. I heard you talking with the younger detective up on the roof. That was right, she had been there. Let's test my theory out. Canaan pointed her index finger at her own heart. If you think I'm Alphard, then shoot me. Right here. Huh? The corner of her mouth twisted up. You can't do it, can you? Tateno's hand shook all the more. You're afraid to pull the trigger. It was as if her words were the spell she was casting over him. You can hardly even stand the thought of pointing your gun at someone. Tateno shook his head violently back and forth, but he couldn't get Canaan's words out of his head. Just keep Maria safe. That's your job. That's what Stanley had said, and he was right. Don't hesitate. Don't think. This was Alphard, a sadistic terrorist. He just needed to trust himself and pull the trigger. Pull it! Pull it! There was a horrid, visceral sound. Gastric fluids rushed up to Tateno's throat. He pitched forward onto his hands and knees and vomited on the spot. The sensation of pulling the trigger, the recoil in the wake of the shot. It was exactly as it had been all those years ago. He never wanted to fire a gun again. At this point, he'd probably never be able to. Where were you even aiming? The voice had come from right in front of him. He looked up to see Canaan standing right there. His heart began hammering like mad. This was the end. He braced himself for oblivion, even as his body cried out to survive. There was the dull roar of a gunshot, and then silence. One last shot.
Okay. So
I have a bunch of things that I can do in order to cause different endings, probably. If I let Canaan in, that's probably a different ending. So I'll probably do that in just a little bit. But for right now, I'm going to call it there. So thank you all for watching, especially if you got this far. Stick around, because there's a lot more to come.